You blind or just stupid? You almost wrecked my car coming around that corner. Pike's voice snapped as his fist drove forward, smashing into Isaiah Brooks' jaw with a sharp, violent crack. Isaiah's head turned with the impact, his body shifting a step as pain flared. But he didn't strike back, didn't even raise his hands. Pike stepped in closer, breath heavy, crowding his space like he owned every inch of it. "People like you don't belong on streets like this," he muttered, shoving him again, harder, testing him. Isaiah's shoes scraped against the asphalt as he steadied himself, calm, controlled, his plain clothes hiding everything Pike couldn't see. His silence only seemed to fuel the arrogance. Pike saw hesitation and mistook it for weakness, pushing further, louder, more certain. He had no idea the man in front of him wasn't backing down. He was waiting, and every second was making Pike's mistake impossible to undo. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. Late Saturday morning, sunshine warmed the neat lawns of Willow Creek Estates. Isaiah Brooks drove his sedan carefully through the suburban streets, his mind heavy with worry. 3 city notices had arrived at his mother's house in the past month. Violations, they called them. The latest one threatened a fine if the structural issues weren't fixed. What structural issues? The house had stood solid for 40 years. Isaiah gripped the steering wheel tighter. The hardware store bags rustled in the passenger seat beside him. He'd gotten everything needed to tackle the so-called violations. Paint for the porch railing, new house numbers, replacement boards for the steps. Small stuff that somehow became big problems when you lived on a street where developers were buying up every house they could get. Something felt different about the neighborhood today. Curtains moved as he passed. People paused their yard work to watch his car. The quiet street felt like it had eyes everywhere. "Almost there, Mom," Isaiah muttered to himself. Loretta's house was just around the next bend. A tidy brick ranch with blue shutters that she'd kept perfect since Isaiah's father died 15 years ago. The sound came first, an engine gunning hard. Then the black SUV appeared, taking the corner way too fast. It barreled straight toward Isaiah's lane. Isaiah slammed his brakes. The sedan lurched to a stop. The SUV swerved at the last second, missing his front bumper by inches. Isaiah's heart hammered in his chest as the vehicle cut across and stopped, blocking the narrow street completely. Both cars sat there, facing each other in the middle of the quiet suburban lane. The SUV's door flung open. A man jumped out, tall, broad-shouldered, his face already red with anger. He wore expensive casual clothes, designer jeans, a polo shirt that stretched across his chest, sunglasses pushed up on his head. His short-cropped hair had that distinct law enforcement cut that Isaiah recognized instantly. "What the hell is your problem?" the man shouted, stomping toward Isaiah's car. Isaiah took a deep breath. He'd been an FBI agent for over 20 years. He knew better than to meet anger with more anger. He stepped out of his car calmly, hands visible. "No problem here," Isaiah said. "You came around that corner pretty fast. I had to stop suddenly." The man got closer, his eyes narrowing as he sized Isaiah up. "I've never seen you around here before." Isaiah noticed the man's watch, a gleaming Rolex that caught the sunlight, the kind bought with money or given as a reward. He also noticed the man's stance, legs planted wide, chin jutting forward, the practiced posture of someone used to being obeyed. "I'm headed to my mother's house," Isaiah explained, keeping his voice level. "Loretta Brooks. Blue house, 3 doors down." "Brooks?" The man's lip curled. "That old place with the peeling paint?" A few neighbors had appeared now. A woman watering flowers across the street paused, hose in hand. An older man walking his dog slowed his pace. They were watching but keeping their distance. That old place. has been her home for 40 years, Isaiah said. I'm helping her with some repairs today. Repairs, the man snorted. About time. This street has standards now. You people need to understand that. Isaiah felt the words like a slap. You people. He'd heard that before. The code was never subtle. I don't think we've been introduced, Isaiah said, keeping his voice steady despite the heat rising in his chest. I'm Isaiah Brooks. Lieutenant Darren Pike, the man replied with a smirk, as if the title alone should make Isaiah step back. I live in the new development at the end of the street. More doors were opening. A teenage boy stepped onto his porch, phone in hand. An elderly couple appeared in their driveway, watching with concerned expressions. Well, Lieutenant Pike, Isaiah said, I'd appreciate it if you'd move your vehicle so I can get to my mother's house. Pike stepped closer. You know what I'd appreciate? If people like you would learn whose street this is before driving like you own the place. It's a public street, Isaiah pointed out. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't made any threatening moves, but he could see his calmness was only making Pike angrier. That told Isaiah everything he needed to know about this man. You got some attitude problem, Pike growled. He glanced around, noticing the growing audience. You new around here? Because things work a certain way in this neighborhood now. Isaiah understood what was happening. This wasn't random road rage. This was territorial. The same force behind those city notices targeting his mother's house. I'm not new, Isaiah said. My mother's lived here longer than anyone else on this block. I grew up in that house. Well, things change, Pike said with a cold smile. Neighborhoods improve. Property values go up. Old houses get replaced with better ones. A woman in jogging clothes had stopped nearby. The teenage boy on the porch was definitely recording now, his phone held at eye level. Is there a problem here? The woman called. Pike ignored her. I own this street, he said, his voice dropping lower, meant just for Isaiah. Me and my friends at City Hall. The people who matter. Isaiah noticed the fraternity-style ring on Pike's right hand. A police academy ring, heavy with symbols of brotherhood and loyalty. The kind that meant protection from other officers. I just want to get to my mother's house, Isaiah said, meeting Pike's gaze without flinching. Your mother should have sold that dump when she had the chance, Pike hissed. Shaw Developments made a fair offer to all you holdouts. But no, you people always have to make things difficult. Isaiah felt a chill. So that was it. The notices, the sudden code violations, all pressure tactics to force the remaining original homeowners to sell. Move your vehicle, Lieutenant, Isaiah said firmly. I have work to do today. More neighbors had appeared now. Doors opened up and down the street. What had started as a near collision was becoming a neighborhood spectacle. You don't tell me what to do, Pike said, his face flushing darker. Not in my neighborhood. Isaiah noticed Pike's body language changing. The man's shoulders tensed, his breathing quickened. His hands, previously gesturing wildly, now formed tight fists at his sides. I'm not looking for trouble, Isaiah said, raising his hands slightly. Just trying to help my mother. You brought trouble when you came here with that attitude, Pike said through clenched teeth. His jaw tightened as he stepped even closer, invading Isaiah's personal space. Isaiah recognized the signs. 20 years in the FBI had taught him to read people in moments of escalation. Pike's dilated pupils, the vein pulsing in his temple, the way he shifted his weight forward onto the balls of his feet. In that instant, Isaiah knew with absolute certainty, this man was about to get physical. This confrontation was seconds away from crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The midday sun beat down on the suburban street as Isaiah Brooks stood beside his car, hands visible at his sides. His calm exterior masked the tactical calculations running through his mind. 20 years of FBI training had taught him to read dangerous situations, and everything about Darren Pike's posture screamed threat. Pike circled him like a predator, his expensive shoes scraping against the asphalt. Several neighbors watched from their yards and porches, uncertain whether to intervene. "You think you can just drive through here like you own the place?" Pike's voice carried down the street. "This isn't your territory." "It's a public road," Isaiah replied evenly. "I'm just trying to get to my mother's house." Pike's face twisted. "Public? This stopped being public when people like me moved in and fixed this neighborhood." He gestured toward the newer homes with their perfect landscaping. "We invested here. We cleaned it up." An older couple had emerged from their house across the street. The woman whispered something to her husband, who nodded gravely. "My mother's house isn't broken," Isaiah said. "It's been well maintained for 40 years. "Your mother's house is an eyesore," Pike spat, "bringing down property values, making the street look bad." Isaiah felt heat rise in his chest, but kept his expression neutral. "That's not true, and you know it." From the corner of his eye, Isaiah noticed a teenage girl with dark hair stepping onto her front porch. Maya Torres. Isaiah recognized her from his visits to his mother. The girl was holding her phone at chest level. The camera lens clearly pointed their way. Pike stepped closer, invading Isaiah's personal space. "You know what your problem is? You people never know when to back down." "You people?" Isaiah repeated quietly. Pike's eyes narrowed. "Yeah, you heard me." Isaiah noticed more phones appearing in windows and doorways. The street had become an audience, and Pike was performing now. "Lieutenant," Isaiah said calmly, "I think we should both get back in our vehicles and—" "Don't tell me what to do," Pike shouted, his voice echoing between the houses. "I own this street. Me and people who matter in this town." A woman in a jogging outfit had stopped nearby. "Hey, leave him alone," she called. Pike ignored her, focusing all his anger on Isaiah. "You think you can talk to me like that? In front of my neighbors?" "I haven't disrespected you," Isaiah said. "I've been calm this whole time." "That's the problem, standing there all high and mighty like nothing touches you." Pike's face had turned deep red. "Like you belong here." Isaiah stood his ground. "I'm not going to be bullied off a public street." Pike moved in closer. "Bullied? You haven't seen bullying yet." He jabbed a finger against Isaiah's chest. "You want to see bullying?" Isaiah didn't flinch. "I want to get to my mother's house." The teenager, Maya, had moved to the edge of her yard, phone still recording. More neighbors had gathered, their expressions a mixture of concern and discomfort. "Your mother should have sold when she had the chance," Pike hissed. "Shaw made fair offers to all you holdouts." "Not interested," Isaiah said firmly. Pike's breathing grew heavier. "Then you'll get what's coming to you. All of you." Pike planted his feet and squared his shoulders. Isaiah recognized the stance immediately, the prelude to violence. He considered his options. He could defend himself, but that might escalate the situation beyond control. He could retreat, but that would put him at a tactical disadvantage. Before Isaiah could decide, Pike's hand shot out, shoving him hard in the shoulder. "You backing down now?" Pike taunted. "Don't put your hands on me," Isaiah said, his voice low but firm. "Or what?" Pike sneered. The tension crackled between them like electricity. Isaiah could feel the eyes of the neighborhood on them, witnessing this raw display of power and control. Pike's right hand curled into a fist. "I've been real patient with you." "Officer, please," called an elderly man from across the street. "There's no need for—" Pike spun around. "Stay out of this!" When he turned back to Isaiah, something had changed in Pike's eyes. A decision made, a line about to be crossed. "Last chance," Pike growled. Isaiah stood his ground. "I'm not looking for trouble." "Too late for that." Pike's fist came without warning, a brutal right hook that slammed into Isaiah's left cheek. The force of the blow sent pain exploding through Isaiah's skull and knocked him off balance. Gasps rippled across the street. Someone shouted, "Oh my God!" Isaiah stumbled, dropping to one knee on the asphalt. His vision blurred as hot pain throbbed through his face. He tasted copper, blood from where his teeth had cut the inside of his cheek. 20 years of training screamed at him to counterattack, to protect himself, but he fought the instinct down. Pike loomed over him, breathing hard, fist still clenched. That's what happens when you don't listen. Isaiah touched his fingers to his cheek, coming away with blood. Around them, the shocked silence had given way to urgent whispers and the unmistakable sound of someone calling 911. He just hit him. Did you see that? He didn't do anything. Maya Torres stood frozen, her phone still recording, her eyes wide with shock. In the distance, the wail of a siren cut through the suburban quiet. Someone had called the police. Pike's expression shifted as he registered the sounds and the reactions of the neighbors. The confidence drained from his face, replaced by something calculating. Isaiah recognized it immediately. The look of a man already crafting his story, already planning his defense. The patrol car turned onto their street, lights flashing. Pike took a step back, straightened his shirt, and ran a hand through his hair. "You brought this on yourself," he said, but the words lacked the certainty of moments before. Isaiah rose slowly to his feet, the pain pulsing through his face with each heartbeat. Blood pooled in his mouth, and he turned to spit it onto the asphalt. The metallic taste lingered on his tongue. The patrol car pulled up beside them, and two uniformed officers jumped out, hands hovering near their weapons as they assessed the scene. "What's going on here?" demanded the first officer, a young man with a crew cut. Before Isaiah could speak, Pike stepped forward, suddenly composed and professional. "Officer Jenkins," he said, his voice transformed into something authoritative and calm. "Glad you're here. We've got a situation." The patrol car's red and blue lights pulsed against the suburban homes as Officer Jenkins stepped between Isaiah and Pike. The second officer, his nameplate read Rodriguez, motioned for Pike to move back toward the SUV. "He attacked me!" a woman shouted from her front lawn. "That man in the black shirt hit him for no reason." Other voices joined in. "I saw the whole thing. He punched him right in the face. Check the video. Maya has it on her phone." Officer Jenkins raised his hands. "Everyone please stay back. We're handling this." Isaiah leaned against his sedan, the side of his face throbbing. He touched his cheek gingerly, feeling the swelling already starting beneath his fingertips. Across the street, he could see Maya Torres still holding her phone, her mother now standing protectively beside her. Pike's voice cut through the commotion, suddenly professional and controlled. "This man aggressively approached my vehicle after a near collision. When I attempted to defuse the situation, he became confrontational and rushed toward me." Isaiah watched Pike transform before his eyes. The rage-filled man who had punched him moments ago, now replaced by a calm, articulate officer of the law. Pike straightened his posture and adjusted his shirt collar. "I identified myself as law enforcement and took necessary defensive action when he advanced on me," Pike continued. "Several witnesses can confirm he was the aggressor." Officer Jenkins nodded, jotting notes. "Sir," he said, turning to Isaiah, "what's your version of events?" Isaiah took a steady breath. "My name is Isaiah Brooks. This man cut me off in traffic, then jumped out of his vehicle shouting. When I explained I was headed to my mother's house on this street, he became increasingly agitated. He verbally threatened me, shoved me, then punched me in the face. At no point did I advance toward him or threaten him physically." "He's lying," Pike interjected. Classic case of trying to flip the script. Officer Rodriguez approached. "Sir, do you require medical attention?" Isaiah wiped blood from his lip, No, I'll be fine. Officer Jenkins looked uneasy as he glanced between the two men. The crowd of neighbors had grown, with at least a dozen people watching from yards and porches. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment, officer?" Isaiah asked quietly. Jenkins nodded, and they stepped a few feet away from the others. In a low voice, Isaiah said, "I should inform you that I am FBI Special Agent Isaiah Brooks. My credentials are in my wallet if you need to verify." Jenkins's eyes widened. "FBI? Sir, I'm not here in an official capacity," Isaiah clarified. "I'm visiting my mother, Loretta Brooks. She lives at 1478, just down the block." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Officer Jenkins stood straighter, his demeanor becoming more formal. He glanced back at Pike, who was watching them with narrowed eyes. "One moment, sir," Jenkins said, then walked over to speak with his partner. Isaiah observed their whispered conversation. Officer Rodriguez's head snapped up to look at him, then back to Pike. Within seconds, Pike's confident expression faltered. His face drained of color as the officers approached him. "Lieutenant Pike," Jenkins said stiffly, "could we have a word?" The three men huddled in conversation. Pike's posture grew increasingly defensive, his gestures sharp and agitated. He glanced repeatedly at Isaiah, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning recognition that the situation had fundamentally changed. Maya Torres's mother called out, "Officers, my daughter has the whole incident recorded. Would you like to see it?" Officer Rodriguez nodded. "We'll need that footage for the report, ma'am." Isaiah felt a surge of grim satisfaction. With witnesses and video evidence, the truth would be undeniable. For a moment, he believed justice might be swift and straightforward. Officer Jenkins returned to Isaiah. "Agent Brooks, Lieutenant Pike claims there was a misunderstanding. We'll need formal statements from everyone. Would you like to press charges?" Several neighbors had edged closer, clearly expecting Pike to be handcuffed on the spot. Even Maya, still holding her phone like a weapon, looked expectant. Isaiah could have demanded immediate action. He could have used his authority to ensure Pike was treated like any other citizen who had assaulted someone. But 20 years of federal service had taught him the value of doing things properly. "I want this documented correctly," Isaiah said calmly. "Full statements, witness accounts, and the video evidence preserved. I'm not asking for special treatment, just proper procedure." Jenkins nodded, relief visible in his eyes. "Yes, sir. We'll take your statement first." As Isaiah gave his official account, he noticed Pike on his phone, stepping away from Officer Rodriguez. Pike's voice was too low to hear, but his urgent manner suggested he wasn't calling his insurance company. After 30 minutes of statements and evidence collection, the officers informed everyone they would file a complete report. They spoke to Pike separately before he climbed into his SUV and drove away, leaving Isaiah with a sense of unfinished business. "You should get some ice on that," suggested an older woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Grayson. "That's going to bruise badly by tomorrow." "Thank you," Isaiah replied. "I'll do that." "We all saw what happened," she assured him. "That man has been trouble since he moved in last year." Isaiah nodded gratefully and returned to his car. As he settled behind the wheel, the adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind anger and a profound sense of violation. He drove the remaining distance to his mother's house, pulling into the familiar driveway of the modest but well-maintained two-story home where he'd grown up. Loretta Brooks was waiting at the door before he could ring the bell. At 79, she still stood straight-backed and keen-eyed, her silver hair cut in a practical bob. "Isaiah? What on earth?" Her words cut off when she saw his face. "Come inside right now." The familiar scent of Loretta's house, lemon polish and fresh laundry, enveloped him as he followed her into the kitchen. Without a word, she went to the freezer, wrapped ice cubes in a dish towel, and handed it to him. "Sit," she commanded. Isaiah pressed the makeshift ice pack to his cheek and sank into a chair at the kitchen table, the same maple table where he'd done homework 30 years ago. "What happened to your face?" Loretta asked, her voice calm but tight with concern. Isaiah described the confrontation in measured terms, trying to minimize the ugliness of it. But Loretta Brooks had raised him alone after his father died. She could read between his lines. "He said he owns this street?" "Those exact words?" she asked. "Yes, right before he hit me." Loretta's lips pressed into a thin line. She pulled out a chair and sat across from him, her hands folded on the table. "I wish I could say I was surprised," she said quietly. Isaiah lowered the ice pack. "What do you mean?" "That man, Pike, he's been circling this block like a vulture for months." Loretta's voice was steady, but Isaiah caught the underlying tension. "Always finding reasons to slow down in front of certain houses, mine included. Has he bothered you personally?" Isaiah felt a fresh surge of anger. Loretta sighed. "Not directly. But 3 weeks ago, I got that citation about my front steps needing repair. Then last week, they claimed my oak tree is diseased and needs to come down." "The oak is perfectly healthy," Isaiah protested. "I checked it when I was here last month." "Of course it is." Loretta reached for his hand. "Isaiah, the Williamsons sold their place after getting hit with thousands in code violations. The Hernandez family moved out after their water line mysteriously broke twice in 1 month." "Isaiah, this isn't random," Loretta said, pushing herself up from the table. Her movements were careful, deliberate, the way she always moved when deeply troubled. "Let me show you something." Isaiah watched as his mother disappeared into her small home office. The ice pack had numbed his face, but anger still burned hot beneath his skin. He'd spent decades investigating civil rights violations, yet here was his own mother, dealing with something that felt eerily familiar. Loretta returned carrying a manila folder stuffed with papers. She set it on the table with the weight of evidence. "This started 3 months ago." She spread the contents across the maple tabletop, official-looking letters with the city seal, violation notices on bright yellow paper, a formal condemnation threat for her front steps, and multiple citations for her oak tree. "This one came first," she said, pointing to a notice dated 14 weeks earlier. "Claimed my trash cans were visible from the street outside of collection days. I've kept them in the same spot for 20 years. Isaiah picked up the citation. "A $150 fine for a first offense? That's excessive." "The next week, they said my mailbox wasn't regulation height." She tapped another notice. "Then it was peeling paint on the garage door. After that, the steps became structurally unsafe." Isaiah examined each document with growing concern. "These are all signed by different inspectors." "Because they're making it up as they go," Loretta said flatly. "The Johnsons next door haven't received a single citation. Neither has the Miller family across the street. Who else is getting these?" "Mrs. Washington at the corner. The Taylors 3 doors down. Mr. Alvarez behind me." Loretta's voice grew quieter. "All of us who've been here over 20 years. All of us who said no to Parkview development." Isaiah looked up sharply. "Someone tried to buy your house?" Loretta nodded, retrieving a business card from the bottom of the folder. "A woman named Evelyn Shaw came by 6 months ago. Very polished, expensive suit. Said they were revitalizing the neighborhood, and offered cash. When I said no, she smiled and said I should reconsider before property values affected my retirement." Isaiah took the card. Embossed lettering read, "Evelyn Shaw, Executive Vice President, Parkview Redevelopment." He committed the name to memory. 2 weeks after I refused, the citations started. Mrs. Washington got them too. The Garcias held out for a month before selling. Their house is being gutted now. Loretta's fingers trembled slightly as she gathered the papers. The Williamsons left after their basement was suddenly not up to code. and they faced $30,000 in repairs. Isaiah pulled out his phone and began photographing each document. Has Pike been involved in any of this? He drives by, slows down, watches who comes and goes. Loretta's voice hardened. Last month, he ticketed every car on Mrs. Washington Street during her grandson's graduation party. Said they were creating a hazardous situation. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just a hot-headed cop with road rage. This was systematic pressure, coordinated harassment designed to wear people down. Who else should I talk to? Isaiah asked. Mr. Alvarez keeps detailed notes. The Taylors installed cameras after someone repeatedly knocked over their mailbox. Loretta hesitated. But people are scared, Isaiah. They've gone quiet. When the police are part of it, who do you call? Isaiah finished photographing the documents, his jaw tight. I need you to tell me everything. Every interaction, every citation, every unusual incident. They spent the next hour at the kitchen table, Loretta recounting a pattern of selective enforcement and intimidation that had slowly tightened around certain homes on the block. Isaiah took careful notes, the investigator in him cataloging names, dates, and potential evidence. What about that redevelopment company? He asked. Have you seen Shaw again? Not her personally, but men in Parkview shirts have been surveying the vacant lot at the end of the block. And last week, Pike was talking to one of them. Loretta's eyes met his. They're working together, aren't they? Isaiah nodded grimly. It looks that way. Later, as evening settled over the neighborhood, Isaiah sat on Loretta's front porch. The bruise on his face throbbed despite the ibuprofen. He watched the quiet street, noting which houses had lights on, which remained dark. 2 doors down, a for sale sign had recently gone up. Across the street, a home sat empty, waiting for renovation. His phone vibrated. Nina's name flashed on the screen. Hey, sweetheart, he answered, trying to keep his voice normal. Dad? What's going on? His daughter's voice was sharp with concern. There's stuff circulating online about you getting into some kind of fight with a cop in Grandma's neighborhood. Isaiah straightened. How did you hear about that? It's already spreading. Someone posted about it in a local Facebook group. Said there was an altercation between a visitor and an off-duty officer. Nina's words came faster. Dad, please tell me what happened. It's being handled, Isaiah said, keeping his voice steady. I'll explain everything when… His words stopped as he glanced at his phone. Nina had sent him a link. He tapped it open to find a video clip already circulating on social media. The footage showed him standing beside his car, then taking a step toward Pike. But crucially, the clip ended before Pike threw the punch. The caption read, FBI agent confronts local police in suburban dispute. Dad? Are you still there? Nina's voice grew more worried. Isaiah stared at the incomplete footage, suddenly understanding the stakes with perfect clarity. The machine was already moving to protect itself. They were rewriting the narrative before the bruise on his face had even fully formed. I need to call you back, he said, his mind racing through implications and necessary next steps. I'm at Grandma's. I'm fine. But Nina, this is bigger than it looks. He ended the call and watched a car slow as it passed Loretta's house. The driver stared directly at him before continuing down the street. Isaiah recognized the deliberate pace, the assessment happening behind that glance. He'd seen it countless times in his career. The look of someone mapping territory, noting vulnerabilities. They thought they owned this street. And now they were watching him. The living room lamp cast soft shadows across Loretta's face as she leaned toward the phone on the coffee table. Isaiah sat beside her, an ice pack pressed against his swollen cheek. Nina's voice crackled through the speaker. Dad, it's getting worse. They're controlling the story already. Nina's frustration was clear even through the phone. The clip that's going viral is cut to make you look like you stepped toward Pike first. Isaiah closed his eyes briefly. What exactly are people seeing? Just you getting out of your car and moving toward him. It cuts off right before he hits you. Nina's typing could be heard in the background. And now, the police department just released a statement calling it a mutual altercation between two adults that unfortunately escalated. Mutual. Isaiah's voice stayed level, but his fingers tightened around the ice pack. The man sucker punched me in broad daylight. This is exactly how truth gets buried, Nina said, her producer instincts kicking in. First, they create confusion with edited footage. Then they use official language to make it sound like both sides were equally wrong. Next comes public doubt about what really happened. Loretta shook her head. Nobody's going to speak up either, not against Pike. Why not? Nina demanded. Loretta's weathered hands folded in her lap. Because he's protected, honey. Connected. Everyone knows what happens to folks who cross him. She looked at Isaiah. Remember Mrs. Wilson, who lived on the corner? After she complained about Pike harassing her grandson, her car got vandalized 3 times. Her insurance dropped her. Next thing, she was packing up to live with her daughter in Ohio. Isaiah pulled out his notebook and began writing. I need names, dates, every detail. His FBI training took over as he documented Pike's appearance, his language during the confrontation, the private security decal he'd noticed on Pike's vehicle. What was the security company? He asked, pen hovering. Summit Ridge Security, Loretta answered. They're the ones who patrol for that new development company, the one run by that woman who keeps sending me letters about selling my house. Nina's voice sharpened. Dad, I think you should file charges immediately. I will, Isaiah said. But first I need to understand what we're dealing with. This wasn't random. And I don't think it's just about one angry cop. You're staying tonight, right? Loretta asked, worry creasing her face. Yes, I'm not leaving you alone. Isaiah touched his mother's hand. I'll take the guest room. Hours later, close to midnight, Isaiah stood at Loretta's front window. The neighborhood was quiet except for distant dog barks and the occasional passing car. He pulled back the curtain slightly when headlights appeared at the end of the street. A dark sedan rolled slowly down the block, its engine barely audible. As it approached Loretta's house, it slowed even further, almost crawling past their driveway. The window was down, and Isaiah could make out a silhouette studying the house. The car lingered for several seconds before continuing down the street. Isaiah let the curtain fall back into place. The message was clear. They knew exactly where he was, and they were watching. Isaiah woke with a start, his neck stiff from a night on Loretta's old couch. He'd insisted his mother take her own bed, despite her protests. Early morning light filtered through lace curtains, casting dappled patterns across the living room. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then, the dull ache in his jaw reminded him. He checked his watch. 6:47 a.m. Despite the early hour, he heard Loretta in the kitchen, the familiar clinking of a spoon against a coffee mug. Isaiah stretched and walked to the front door to check the street. That's when he saw it. A crisp white envelope pushed halfway under the door. Not mail, not a package. A hand-delivered message. Isaiah knelt and carefully picked it up, noting there were no fingerprints besides his own, now marring the surface. The envelope contained an official-looking notice from the city's Code Enforcement Division, citing Loretta for vegetation encroachment and structural maintenance violations. He stood in the doorway, scanning the empty street. Whoever delivered this had come and gone in the pre-dawn hours. A message timed like a threat. We know where you live. We're watching. We aren't stopping. Is that another one? Loretta appeared behind him, coffee cup in hand. Isaiah turned. Same department? Different violation? Third notice this month. Loretta's voice was calm, but Isaiah caught the worry in her eyes. They used to come every few months. Now it's every week. Isaiah added the notice to his growing file. I need to talk to the neighbors today, while yesterday is still fresh in everyone's mind. I'll make some calls, Loretta said. People will talk to you if I introduce you. After a quick breakfast, Isaiah and Loretta began their neighborhood canvass. Their first stop was the Torres household, where Maya, the teenager who had recorded the assault, lived with her mother. Mrs. Torres answered the door cautiously, recognition and worry flashing across her face when she saw Isaiah's bruised cheek. Maya showed me what happened, she said, inviting them in but glancing nervously at the street. It was terrible. What that man did to you. Maya joined them in the living room, phone clutched in her hand. I got everything, she said, from when he jumped out of his car to when he hit you. Clear as day. We need that video, Isaiah said gently. The one online has been edited to make it look like I started it. Mrs. Torres shook her head. 2 officers came by last night asking if Maya had filmed anything. They said they wanted to secure all evidence. Fear tightened her voice. We told them no. You lied to the police? Isaiah asked. We had to, Maya insisted. I heard what they're saying online about you. They're twisting everything. Mrs. Torres touched her daughter's shoulder. We can't get involved. My husband's work permit renewal is pending. We can't risk. Isaiah nodded, understanding their impossible position. Keep the original file safe, he told Maya. Don't delete it, but don't share it yet either. Their next stop was Helen Reese's meticulously kept bungalow. The elderly widow invited them to her sunroom, where African violets bloomed in the window. 6 citations in 4 months, Helen told them, spreading papers across her table. First, it was my front steps. Too steep, they said. Then the porch railing, then the gutters. I fixed everything, but they keep finding more. When did it start? Isaiah asked. After I told that Shaw woman I wasn't selling. Helen's voice hardened. Next day, Pike drove by, real slow-like. Day after that, first citation arrived. 2 doors down, Tom Halpern, a Vietnam veteran with a flagpole in his yard, shared a similar story. Applied for a permit to build a wheelchair ramp. My wife has MS. Tom's weathered face tightened. Denied 3 times over aesthetic concerns. When I spoke up at a zoning meeting, my car got ticketed every day for a week. Pike was parked across the street the morning I found my mailbox smashed. By midday, Isaiah had filled pages with accounts that all pointed to the same pattern. Refuse to sell. Face harassment. Complain publicly. Face consequences. Stand your ground. Get ground down. His phone rang. It was Nina. Pike's not being arrested, she said without preamble. Local news is reporting he's on administrative leave pending review. That's code for paid vacation until this blows over. I figured as much, Isaiah replied, watching a patrol car cruise slowly past Tom's house. How soon can you get here? I'm already on my way. 2 hours, tops. I'm bringing recording equipment. Isaiah spent the afternoon methodically documenting everything, restraining himself from making calls to federal contacts. He needed to build this case properly, establish the pattern beyond any individual incident. His face throbbed as a reminder of what happened when systems failed. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Loretta's front yard, Nina's car pulled into the driveway. She jumped out, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, determination in every step. Isaiah met her on the porch. The moment she saw his face, the bruise now a deep purple spanning his cheekbone, her professional composure cracked. She wrapped her arms around him, hugging him fiercely. I can't believe they did this to you, she whispered. It's not just me, Isaiah said as they separated. Come inside. I need to show you everything I've gathered. In Loretta's dining room, Isaiah spread out his notes, photos, and the timeline he'd constructed. Nina examined everything, her producer's eye picking up the narrative thread instantly. "This isn't random," she said, connecting the dots on Isaiah's timeline. "The citations, the harassment, the selective enforcement, it's coordinated." She looked up at her father, her expression hardening. "We're not dealing with one violent cop, Dad. This is an organized machine. They're systematically forcing people out, and they're using the police, code enforcement, everything at their disposal to do it." Loretta placed a pot of coffee on the table. "Been telling people for months, but nobody wants to hear an old woman's conspiracy theories." "It's not a theory anymore," Isaiah said, placing his hand over his mother's. "And we're going to prove it." Nina squared her shoulders, the same way she had since childhood when facing a challenge. "Where do we start?" "We map every incident, every player, every connection," Isaiah replied, his FBI training coming to the fore. "Then we find their weak point." Outside, the streetlights flickered on, illuminating Loretta's front yard, the same yard now cited for vegetation encroachment, the same home they were trying to take, the same community being deliberately dismantled, one citation, one threat, one punch at a time. Sunday evening settled into Loretta's dining room like an old friend. The overhead light remained off, with only a single table lamp casting long shadows across the wooden surface. Isaiah, Nina, and Loretta hunched over a growing collection of evidence spread across the table. City notices with matching dates, a handwritten list of neighbors who'd been targeted, and photographs of recent property sales in the neighborhood. Nina tapped her pen against a notepad, frustration evident in every movement. "We need to go public with this now, Dad. You were assaulted by an off-duty cop in broad daylight. That's the headline that gets attention." Isaiah shook his head, wincing slightly as the movement aggravated his bruised cheek. "That's exactly what they expect us to do. Make it about one incident, one bad apple." "It's not just about the punch," Nina insisted, her voice rising. "It's about everything behind it. The harassment, the intimidation. Which is why we need a complete case," Isaiah countered. "Not just outrage." Loretta watched her son and granddaughter from the head of the table, her expression calm but eyes alert. "By the time we build your perfect case, they'll have buried everything," Nina argued. "I've seen how this works. First, they control the narrative. Then they wait for public interest to fade. Then it's yesterday's news." Isaiah leaned forward. "And I've seen how cases collapse when you move too fast. These people have institutional protection. The department, the union, city officials, they're all connected. We need more than just what happened to me. While we wait, they're squeezing more families out." Nina's palm hit the table, scattering some papers. Isaiah reached across and covered her hand with his. "I know you're angry. I am too. But I've spent my career building cases that stick against people who thought they were untouchable. Trust me on this." Their eyes met, the same determined expression on two different generations. 3 days, Nina finally conceded. "That's how long I'll wait before I start making calls to my contacts." Isaiah nodded, then reached for his phone. "I need to bring someone else in. Someone I trust." He dialed Evan Doyle, his colleague at the Bureau. After 20 years working together, Doyle was the one person Isaiah knew would approach this situation with both caution and commitment. Doyle answered on the third ring. "Brooks, it's Sunday night. Either you miss me terribly or something's wrong." Isaiah managed a small smile despite the pain. "Need your eyes on something, unofficially." He outlined the situation, keeping his voice low and measured. "Send me everything you have," Doyle replied, his tone shifting from friendly to professional. "But Isaiah, once these local players figure out you're federal, they won't make stupid mistakes anymore. They'll get careful. Strategic. That's what I'm counting on, Isaiah said. Careful leaves, traces. After ending the call, Isaiah turned back to find Nina already on her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Following the money," she replied without looking up. "Every sale on this block in the last 18 months. Property records, corporate filings, LLC registrations." For the next 2 hours, Nina dug through public records while Isaiah organized witness statements and Loretta made fresh coffee. The dining room fell into a rhythm of keyboard clicks, paper shuffling, and occasional murmurs of discovery. "Got something," Nina announced just after 11. 3 properties sold in the last year all went to different buyers on paper, but they all trace back to subsidiary companies controlled by Meridian Partners. "Who's behind Meridian?" Isaiah asked, moving to look over her shoulder. "Evelyn Shaw is the CEO. Nina pulled up a corporate photograph of a polished woman in her 50s, with a practiced smile. "She's on the Chamber of Commerce, the Community Foundation Board, and donates to every political campaign in the county." Isaiah wrote the name down. Shaw. Pike's SUV had a security decal linked to her contractor. Loretta stood silent at the edge of the light, watching them work. Something in her posture caught Isaiah's attention. "Mom? What is it?" She hesitated, then spoke quietly. "She came to see me, Miss Shaw, about 6 months ago. Very polite, very understanding. Offered what she called market value, plus consideration for my circumstances." Isaiah set down his pen. "You never mentioned this." "Didn't seem important at the time. I said no." She smiled like it didn't matter. And a week later, the first notice came. Loretta's gaze dropped to the papers on the table. "Last month, when the water heater broke and they said my electrical wasn't up to code, I almost called her. Just to make it all stop." The admission hung in the air like smoke. Isaiah felt something twist in his chest, harder and deeper than the physical blow he'd taken yesterday. The thought of his mother, proud, independent Loretta, being worn down to the point of surrender, wounded him in ways Pike's fist never could. Nina reached for her grandmother's hand. "They're not getting this house, not your home." Isaiah stood up, needing movement. "I'm going to step outside for a minute." The night air felt cool against his face as he stood on Loretta's front porch. The street was quiet except for distant traffic and the soft chirping of crickets. He inhaled deeply, trying to clear his head. A patrol car turned onto the block, moving slowly. Isaiah watched as it approached, then stopped at the corner directly across from Loretta's house. The headlights remained fixed on the property, bright and unmoving in the darkness. 1 minute passed, then 2. A clear message. "You are being watched." Finally, the cruiser pulled away, continuing its patrol with deliberate slowness. Isaiah didn't move until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then he turned back toward the house, his resolve hardening like cement. This wasn't just about a punch anymore. This was about his mother's right to live in peace in the home she'd owned for 40 years. This was about a community being dismantled through fear, and Isaiah Brooks had never been the kind of man who backed down from a fight. Monday morning arrived with a heaviness that hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Isaiah stood in Loretta's kitchen, studying the new violation notice that had appeared mysteriously under her door. The official city seal and threatening language about immediate compliance made his jaw tighten. "This is harassment, plain and simple," Nina said, pouring coffee into a travel mug. She wore a blazer over jeans, professional enough for City Hall but comfortable enough for what might become a long day. Loretta sat at the kitchen table, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose as she examined the notice for the 3rd time. "They say my front steps don't meet code. Those steps have been the same for 30 years. Isaiah folded the paper carefully. "We're going to get this sorted out today." "Should I come with you?" Loretta asked, looking up. No, Mom. Nina and I will handle this. Isaiah squeezed her shoulder gently. Just keep your doors locked. Call immediately if anyone shows up. Loretta nodded, but her fingers tapped an anxious rhythm on the tablecloth. Be careful how you speak to these people, Isaiah. They know how to twist things. Trust me, he said with a reassuring smile that didn't reach his eyes. I deal with bureaucracy for a living. 20 minutes later, Isaiah pulled into the City Hall parking lot, his bruised face a physical reminder of Saturday's confrontation. The modern 3-story building gleamed in the morning light, all glass and concrete efficiency. Look professional, stay calm, document everything, Isaiah reminded Nina as they walked toward the entrance. I know how to handle officials, she replied. I interview politicians for a living. The Building Code Enforcement Office occupied a corner of the first floor. Inside, 3 clerks worked behind a high counter, separated from the public by a glass partition. A woman with bottle-blonde hair and a name tag reading Meredith smiled automatically as Isaiah approached. I'd like to discuss a violation notice issued to Loretta Brooks on Maple Street, Isaiah said, sliding the paper through the small opening at the bottom of the partition. Meredith's smile never changed as she took the notice. Let me pull up that information for you. Are you the property owner? Her son. This is the 3rd notice in 2 months, and we believe there's been a mistake. The system doesn't make mistakes, sir, Meredith replied, her fingers clicking efficiently on her keyboard. If a violation was issued, an inspector found legitimate concerns. Nina leaned forward. Can we speak with the inspector who issued it? Inspector Davidson isn't available today. I can schedule you for next week. Next week? Isaiah kept his voice level. The notice demands compliance within 72 hours, or faces fines of $200 per day. Meredith's expression remained pleasant, but unmoved. I understand your frustration, but I can only tell you what's in the system. For the next hour, Isaiah and Nina were shuffled between 3 different clerks, each repeating variations of the same unhelpful responses. No one could explain why Loretta's property suddenly warranted such urgent attention after decades without issues. Finally, a younger clerk with nervous eyes glanced around before whispering, Some addresses get special attention. It's not something we talk about. Special attention? Isaiah pressed. What does that mean? The clerk's eyes widened at something behind Isaiah, and he quickly stepped back. I just process the paperwork, sir. I don't make the decisions. A supervisor appeared, introducing herself with practiced efficiency. I understand you have concerns about a notice, but our inspectors follow strict protocols. If you'd like to file an appeal, there's a $150 filing fee, and the review committee meets next month. Isaiah recognized the tactic immediately. Delay, expense, bureaucracy as a weapon. He thanked them politely and led Nina outside. That was a complete waste of time, Nina fumed as they stepped into the sunshine. Not entirely, Isaiah replied. We confirmed what we suspected. This isn't random. They walked toward the parking lot, only to stop short at the sight of Isaiah's car. A bright orange parking ticket was tucked under the windshield wiper. You've got to be kidding me, Nina groaned, plucking the ticket free. Violation. Vehicle parked more than 12 inches from curb. This is ridiculous. You're barely 6 inches from the curb. Isaiah surveyed the row of cars. Several were parked farther from the curb than his, yet his was the only one ticketed. Nina immediately took photos of the car's position and the surrounding vehicles. They're sending a message, Isaiah said quietly. They know who we are and why we're here. By early afternoon, they were back at Loretta's house. Isaiah's laptop was open on the dining room table as he video-called with Evan Doyle. I've been reviewing everything you sent, Doyle said, his face serious on the screen. There's something interesting in Pike's employment records. What did you find? Isaiah leaned closer. He moonlights 20 hours a week for Sentinel Security. They're a private firm that handles site security for several development projects in your area. Doyle's face was replaced by documents on the screen. And 3 of those projects in the last year were managed by Meridian Partners. Evelyn Shaw's company, Nina murmured. It gets better, Doyle continued. Sentinel is owned by Glenn Mercer, former police chief and current head of the police union's Legal Defense Fund, the same fund that would represent Pike if any complaints were filed against him. Isaiah wrote the names down, connecting them with lines. So the man who assaulted me works part-time for a security company owned by the former police chief, who provides legal protection for officers, and both companies have business ties to the developer trying to buy out my mother's neighborhood. It's not proof of conspiracy yet, Doyle cautioned, but it's enough to show that the same people benefit when homeowners like your mother get worn down and sell. Isaiah's phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Police came by asking about the video. They wanted to know if it really showed everything. Nina's phone pinged seconds later. She read the message and looked up at Isaiah, her face pale. They're pressuring her to change her story. Isaiah turned back to the screen. Evan, we need to move faster. They're already working on the witnesses. As evening fell, Nina sat cross-legged on Loretta's couch, her laptop balanced on her knees as she scrolled through files. Suddenly, she stopped, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Isaiah, she whispered. Maya might have automatic cloud backup enabled on her phone. He looked up from his notes. What do you mean? Most phones have a setting that automatically backs up photos and videos, Nina explained, her voice gaining excitement. Even if the original video gets deleted from her phone, or if she edits it, the original might still exist in her cloud storage. If we could recover the unedited video, Isaiah started, then we'd have solid proof that Pike threw the first punch, Nina finished. Proof that can't be explained away. Isaiah felt the first spark of hope since Saturday's assault. Call her. Right now. Tuesday morning light streamed through Loretta's kitchen windows. Isaiah nursed a cup of coffee while Nina finished her toast. Loretta moved about slowly, arranging fruit on a plate none of them had touched. You sure this girl will talk to you? Loretta asked, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen promises break too many times. Nina nodded. Maya texted me back last night. Her mom's nervous, but they agreed to meet me at the coffee shop near the high school. She checked her watch. I should get going. Isaiah spread his notes across the table. While you work on the video, I'll dig deeper into those property records. And I've got Bernard Ellis from the records department willing to meet me for lunch. Be careful, Loretta said, squeezing his shoulder. These people play rough. That's exactly why we need solid proof, Isaiah replied. Not just for me, but for everyone they've been pushing around. Nina grabbed her laptop bag and car keys. I'll call you as soon as I know something. The local coffee shop sat half empty when Nina arrived. Maya and her mother, Carmen Torres, occupied a corner table far from the windows. Maya, with her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, nervously tapped her fingers against her cup. Carmen's posture was rigid, eyes constantly scanning the door. Thank you for meeting me, Nina said, sliding into the seat across from them. She kept her voice low and calm. I know this is scary. The police came to our house, Carmen said immediately. They said Maya could get in trouble for recording without permission, that it might be illegal in some states. That's not true in this state, Nina assured her. You have every right to record in public places. Maya stared at her coffee. They made me feel like I did something wrong. Like I was the criminal instead of that cop. You did nothing wrong, Nina said firmly. You captured the truth. That's why they're scared. Over the next hour, Nina built a careful bridge of trust. She shared stories of her own father's career fighting civil rights violations. She explained how evidence like Maya's could protect other families. She never pushed or rushed. Finally, Maya pulled out her phone. I have the settings that back everything up automatically. My dad set it up after I lost all my photos last year when my old phone broke. Can you check your cloud account? Nina asked. The original video might still be there, even if you deleted it from your phone. Maya's fingers moved quickly across the screen, navigating through folders. Here, she finally said, turning the phone toward Nina. This is the one I never sent anyone. I was too scared after the cops came. The thumbnail showed a clear image of Pike and Isaiah facing each other in the street. Maya, this could change everything, Nina said. Would you be willing to share this with me? Carmen placed a protective hand on her daughter's arm. What happens if we do? Will those police come back? I promise we'll protect your family, Nina said. My father works for the FBI. We can make sure there's no retaliation. Maya looked at her mother, who nodded slowly. Okay, Maya said. I'll send it to you. Across town, Isaiah sat in a quiet corner of a diner booth. Bernard Ellis, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a permanent look of worry, slid in across from him. I shouldn't be here, Bernard said immediately, his voice barely above a whisper. If they find out, no one will know, Isaiah assured him. I appreciate you taking this risk. Bernard pulled a flash drive from his pocket. It's all in here. The patterns are clear once you know what to look for. He slid it across the table. Code enforcement complaints against properties on your mother's street jumped 340% in the last 8 months. And every spike follows the same sequence. Police reports about suspicious activity or quality of life issues, then code violations, then tax reassessments. All targeting properties that haven't sold to developers, Isaiah added. Bernard nodded. Exactly. And there are emails. Shaw's company representatives meet regularly with zoning officials and police leadership. They call it neighborhood improvement planning, but it's really identifying which homeowners to pressure next. Can you get me those emails? Bernard swallowed hard. I've flagged them in the system. I can download copies tonight when the office is empty. But after that, I'm done. My pension is all I have. I understand, Isaiah said. One more night is all we need. By midday, Nina and Isaiah sat side by side at Loretta's dining room table, staring at Nina's laptop screen. The unedited video played with perfect clarity. Watch, Nina said, pointing. Right here. On screen, Pike jabbed his finger into Isaiah's chest. I own this street, Pike snarled, his face contorted with rage. People like you need to learn your place. Then came the shove, followed immediately by the punch. No provocation, no self-defense justification, just raw, unprovoked assault. This is exactly what we needed, Isaiah said, his voice steady despite the anger seeing it again triggered. The complete context. I've already contacted Vivian at Channel 8, Nina said. She's a serious investigative reporter. No ties to local advertisers or the police union. She wants to see this today. Isaiah nodded. And Bernard is getting us the email trail tonight. By tomorrow, we could have enough to take to federal prosecutors. For the first time since Saturday, hope felt real, not just wishful thinking. The truth was documented. The pattern was emerging. The connections were clear. We're going to win this, aren't we? Nina asked. We're going to make it right, Isaiah replied. Not just for me, but for your grandmother and everyone else they've been pushing around. Tuesday evening settled over the neighborhood. Isaiah and Nina sat on Loretta's front porch, the warm air carrying the scent of someone's distant barbecue. A sense of cautious victory hung between them. Once Vivian sees this footage, Pike is finished, Nina said. There's no spinning his way out of what he clearly did. And Bernard's evidence will connect the dots to the bigger scheme, Isaiah added. The harassment, the coordinated pressure, all of it. I can't believe we might actually… Nina stopped mid-sentence, following her father's suddenly tense gaze. Down the block, a dark sedan sat parked under a tree, its lights off. Even in the fading light, they could make out the silhouette of someone sitting in the driver's seat, watching Loretta's house. Isaiah's jaw tightened. The victory they'd been savoring suddenly felt premature. Wednesday morning arrived with gray skies and a chill that seemed to seep through the walls of Loretta's house. Isaiah's phone rang at 6:42 a.m. He didn't recognize the number but answered immediately. "Mr. Brooks?" The voice was unfamiliar, tight with tension. "This is Officer Ramirez from County Traffic Division. I'm calling about Bernard Ellis." Isaiah's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "Single vehicle accident late last night. His car went off Ridgeline Road near the reservoir. Paramedics pronounced him at the scene." The words landed like hammer blows. Bernard, the clerk who had promised emails linking Pike, code enforcement, and Shaw's redevelopment scheme, was gone. "Was anyone else involved?" Isaiah asked, already suspecting the answer. "No, sir. Preliminary investigation suggests he lost control on a curve." Isaiah thanked the officer and hung up. Nina found him in the kitchen, staring at nothing. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Bernard Ellis is dead. Car crash last night." Nina's face went pale. "Right after he agreed to help us? That's not a coincidence." "No," Isaiah said. "It's a message." By noon, the day had darkened further. Nina's phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. "Need to postpone our meeting. Legal has concerns about the story. Will update when I can." "They got to her too," Nina said, showing Isaiah the screen. "Someone leaned on the station." Isaiah nodded grimly. "They're closing every door." The afternoon brought worse news. Isaiah's phone lit up with a call from his bureau supervisor. "Brooks, I've got internal affairs asking questions about Saturday's incident," he said without preamble. "There's an allegation you leveraged your position during a personal dispute. You're on administrative leave until this clears." "That's ridiculous." "It's procedure. Turn in your credentials tomorrow morning." Isaiah had barely processed this when a white van with county inspection on the side pulled up to Loretta's house. Two men in uniforms approached with clipboards. "Emergency inspection," one announced without warmth. "We received an anonymous tip about structural dangers." "This house has stood for 40 years, Loretta protested, but they pushed past her. The inspection lasted 20 minutes. Their verdict was immediate and devastating. Foundation cracks, electrical hazards, possible black mold. "We're issuing an emergency vacation order," the lead inspector declared, handing Loretta a red notice. "Property is unsafe for occupancy." "This is fabricated," Isaiah said. The inspector's face hardened. "You can appeal, but the house is closed effective immediately. You have 2 hours to gather essentials." They had barely begun packing when the sound of breaking glass came from the back of the house. Isaiah rushed to find the kitchen window shattered, glass across the floor, and fresh damage to the porch supports. "Vandals," he said, but they all knew it was more targeted than that. By sunset, they had crammed Loretta's medications, clothes, and irreplaceable photos into 3 suitcases. Isaiah watched his mother's face as she locked her front door, knowing she might not return. Wednesday night, in a cramped motel room paid for by Nina, Loretta sat on the edge of the bed, her house keys clutched in her wrinkled hands like a talisman. Isaiah stood by the window, staring into the parking lot, stripped of his badge, his authority, and his confidence. "I tried to do this the right way," he said quietly, "and it's only made things worse." Late Wednesday night, the motel room sat in near darkness, lit only by the neon glow filtering through thin curtains. Isaiah Brooks perched in a hard plastic chair by the window, his back straight, despite exhaustion pulling at him. On one bed, Loretta tossed restlessly, her breathing never settling into the rhythm of sleep. On the other, Nina scrolled through her phone, pretending to work, but really just keeping her eyes from closing. Isaiah's cheek still throbbed where Pike had struck him, but that pain was nothing compared to the hollow ache in his chest. The bureau suspension felt distant, almost meaningless next to his failure to protect his mother. He stared at his hands, hands that had built cases against corrupt officials for years, now powerless when it mattered most. "I waited too long," he whispered to himself. "I gave them time to hit back." The sheets rustled as Loretta sat up, not bothering to pretend sleep would come. "You think I'm sleeping with all this on my mind?" she asked, her voice stronger than her tired frame suggested. "Come sit here." Isaiah moved to the edge of her bed, shoulders slumped. "You look just like your father when things went wrong," Loretta said, patting his arm. "Same frown lines." "I should have pushed harder," Isaiah said. "Flashed my badge, forced their hand." Loretta shook her head. "Listen to me. Decent people lose because they think one truth, plainly told, should be enough. It never is." Her eyes, despite everything, remained clear and determined. "Men like Pike, they survive by burying truth. Under paperwork, under fear, under delay. They hide the whole elephant by showing people different parts, never letting anyone see the whole beast." Nina put down her phone, listening. "So what do we do?" Isaiah asked. "Stop trying to make them admit to one punch," Loretta said. "Gather so much proof they can't bury it all. One truth they can crush. 20 truths. That's harder." Something stirred in Isaiah's mind. Not hope yet, but determination. The strategic part of his brain began working again, methodically. "She's right," Nina said, sitting up fully. "We've been playing their game on their field." As night thinned toward dawn, Isaiah's thinking sharpened. He paced the small room, energy returning to his movements. This wasn't just about an assault anymore. It wasn't even about local misconduct. "We need to reframe everything," he said. "Civil rights conspiracy, witness intimidation, evidence tampering, fraud through the redevelopment scheme." Nina nodded eagerly. "I'll stop waiting for terrified gatekeepers. I'll build an independent release plan, something they can't pressure into silence." By sunrise, pale light spilled through the cheap curtains, painting stripes across the worn carpet. Isaiah sat at the small desk, a fresh page open in his notebook. His handwriting was precise as he wrote a single word at the top: conspiracy. The sunrise painted the diner windows gold as Isaiah slid into the vinyl booth across from Evan Doyle. The FBI colleague looked out of place in the roadside eatery, his pressed shirt and watchful eyes marking him as law enforcement even without a badge. Nina arrived moments later, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, determination etched into her face. "I'm technically not supposed to be here," Doyle said quietly, after the waitress poured coffee, and retreated. "But some things matter more than protocols." Isaiah nodded gratefully. "I need to build this right. Not just my assault, the whole pattern." "The suspension is procedural nonsense," Doyle said. "But it means everything we gather has to be airtight. No shortcuts." They hunched over a napkin as Isaiah sketched out their approach. The steam from their mugs fogged the edge of the paper. "I'll revisit the residence," Isaiah said. "Get written statements about the pressure tactics. Dates, names, badge numbers when possible." Nina tapped her laptop. "I've already started mapping property acquisitions around Mom's block. There's a pattern to which houses they targeted first. And I've got Maya's full video ready for distribution when we move." Doyle leaned in, voice dropping. "I can't officially run this yet, but I can check database access logs. See who pulled information on your mother's address and when. If Pike used department resources for private intimidation, that's federal." The waitress refilled their cups, eyeing their intense conversation with curiosity. They fell silent until she moved away. "These people aren't used to targets who fight back," Nina said. By midday, they had split up. Isaiah sat in Helen Reese's living room, recording her trembling voice as she described 3 separate code violations that appeared the day after she declined a courtesy visit from a developer. "I thought I was losing my mind," she said, her thin fingers clutching a stack of notices identical to Loretta's. "They made me feel like I was the problem." Across town, Nina received an email from Sandra Vale, a county records analyst who'd spotted the pattern herself. "Look at these timestamps," Sandra's message read. "Code enforcement actions against 6 properties on your mother's block all coincided with redevelopment bidding windows. That's not coincidence." By late afternoon, Tom Halpern, the veteran who'd moved rather than continue fighting, agreed to speak on record. "I fought in Desert Storm," he said bitterly to Isaiah. "Never thought I'd be driven out of my own country by bullies with badges." As evening approached, they reconvened at the diner. Nina spread printouts across the table showing a timeline of Pike's vehicle near disputed properties. Off-duty, but regular as clockwork. "He wasn't random," she said, tapping the pattern. "He was the muscle." What had been isolated complaints now formed a constellation of evidence. Victims began to see themselves as witnesses, their individual suffering part of a coherent story. As they pulled into the motel parking lot that night, Nina's phone buzzed with a message from Maya's mother. The text was simple. "You need to see who was outside that house." Attached was doorbell camera footage from the night of Loretta's vandalism. Thursday night, the motel room felt smaller as they huddled around Nina's laptop. Isaiah stood behind her chair, hands gripping the backrest. Loretta perched on the edge of the bed, her face tight with worry. Doyle leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Play it," Isaiah said. Nina clicked the video file. The grainy nighttime footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera filled the screen. The timestamp showed 9:17 p.m., less than an hour before the vandalism report. "There," Nina pointed. A white contractor truck with Eastland Construction on the side parked half a block from Loretta's house. 2 men got out and walked toward her property, disappearing from the frame. "Eastland is one of Shaw's regular contractors," Doyle noted. "They handle most of the renovations after acquisitions." Nina switched to a second clip, this one from a camera 3 houses down. The angle caught the side street. "Watch this part," she said, her voice tight. At 9:23 p.m., a black SUV, the same model Pike had been driving, pulled up. Pike stepped out, looked around, and approached a man in a work jacket who had emerged from the direction of Loretta's backyard. "Turn it up," Isaiah said. The audio was faint, but clear enough. "Make sure it looks random," Pike said to the man. "Just enough to fail inspection tomorrow." Loretta's hand went to her mouth. "They planned it all." "It's not enough alone," Doyle cautioned. "They could claim they were there for legitimate security concerns." "But it cracks their wall," Isaiah said. "And walls only need 1 crack to start falling." The next morning, they gathered at Doyle's apartment. His laptop displayed database access logs he'd quietly obtained through a bureau contact. "Here's their fatal mistake," Doyle said, scrolling through the records. "Pike used the Leeds law enforcement database to pull property and personal information on every holdout homeowner on your block, Loretta." He showed them timestamps of searches, addresses, financial histories, even driving records, all accessed through Pike's credentials. "And look at this," Doyle continued, opening another file. "Each search aligns perfectly with properties later approached by Shaw's acquisition team. Within days of Pike pulling your information, Loretta, you got your first code violation." Isaiah studied the screen. "This is it. The bridge connecting everything. Assault, harassment, property pressure, and misuse of official resources." "This isn't just misconduct," Doyle said. "This is conspiracy and civil rights violation. I know a federal supervisor who's insulated from local politics. She owes me one, and she hates corrupt cops more than anyone." By Friday afternoon, Doyle had delivered the full evidence package. Meanwhile, Nina's phone lit up with a notification from a community Facebook page. "Look at this," she said, showing Isaiah a glossy digital flyer. "Evelyn Shaw is hosting a neighborhood revitalization event tomorrow, on your mom's street. Pike and Glenn Mercer are both expected to attend." "Perfect timing," Isaiah said, his face hardening with resolve. Saturday morning arrived exactly 1 week after the assault. The same street where Isaiah had been punched now looked different. Banners hung between light poles, white tents dotted the sidewalks, and catered tables lined the curb for Evelyn Shaw's staged revitalization event. Signs proclaimed Eastland Heights, a new vision, with glossy renderings of luxury townhomes where old houses now stood. Isaiah, Nina, and Loretta sat in a borrowed car half a block away, watching the scene unfold. "There she is," Nina whispered, pointing to Evelyn Shaw. Shaw glided through the gathering crowd in a cream-colored suit, her red hair styled perfectly. She shook hands and laughed at just the right moments, pointing to property sketches with practiced enthusiasm. Her smile never reached her eyes. "And there's Pike," Isaiah said. Darren Pike stood near the main tent in a tailored navy suit, looking nothing like the rage-filled man from a week before. He laughed loudly, clapping backs and accepting congratulations. No trace of worry lined his face. "He thinks he's won," Loretta said quietly. Glenn Mercer worked the crowd with political smoothness, moving from group to group, whispering reassurances and controlling the narrative. When reporters approached, he steered them toward prepared talking points about community improvement. Nina checked her phone and nodded to Isaiah. "Everything's ready." Isaiah stayed perfectly still, hands folded in his lap. The swelling on his face had faded, but the memory hadn't. He watched Pike joke with a city councilman, waiting. Then it happened. 3 unmarked black SUVs flooded in from one end of the street. 2 more blocked the other exit. Conversations died instantly as federal agents in windbreakers stepped out fast, surrounding the scene. "Darren Pike," a lead agent called out, voice cutting through the sudden silence. Pike froze mid-sentence, champagne glass in hand. For a split second, his face showed genuine shock before he snapped into motion, backing away, shaking his head. "This is a mistake," he said loudly, voice rising. "What is this?" When agents closed in, Pike's control shattered. He shoved one hard and tried to break through the crowd. Gasps erupted. A woman screamed as he knocked over a display board. Pike swung wildly at another agent, desperate, but they converged, forcing him down onto the same pavement where he had stood over Isaiah. He fought viciously, twisting, cursing, refusing the cuffs. "Do you know who I am? You can't do this." "Federal agents! You're under arrest for civil rights violations, conspiracy, and witness intimidation," the agent announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. Mercer stepped forward, voice commanding. "This is completely inappropriate." His words cut off as an agent approached with cuffs. "You're making a serious mistake," he warned before they secured his wrists. Shaw's polished composure collapsed as agents surrounded her. Her face drained of color when they mentioned wire fraud and conspiracy charges. At that moment, Nina pressed send on her phone. The full story went live, complete with unedited video, property records, database misuse evidence, and witness statements. Phones throughout the crowd began buzzing with notifications. As Pike was dragged upright, defeated, and exposed, he locked eyes with Isaiah across the crowd, and realized the man he struck never needed to strike back. Late Saturday afternoon, just hours after the arrests, Isaiah Brooks stood inside Loretta's living room as county officials formally revoked the condemnation order. The inspector, a woman with kind eyes and a firm handshake, looked embarrassed as she stamped the paperwork. "This never should have happened," she said, handing Loretta the official clearance. "We'll have a crew out Monday to repair that window properly." Isaiah watched his mother's face. The relief was there, but something stronger, too. Vindication. She took the papers without trembling. "About time," Loretta said, her voice steady as oak. News of the arrests spread like wildfire. Isaiah's phone buzzed constantly with updates. Pike faced assault, civil rights violations, and conspiracy charges. His resistance during arrest, caught on dozens of phones, added obstruction and assaulting a federal officer to his troubles. No badge would shield him now. Mercer had been removed from the police union in disgrace, stripped of influence as former allies rushed to distance themselves. Several officers had already come forward, admitting pressure to target specific properties. Shaw's company assets were frozen under investigation, her carefully constructed empire unraveling with each new document release. 3 city officials had resigned by noon. "Your internal review is closing," Doyle told Isaiah over the phone. "Cleared completely. The Bureau's backing you 100% now." Outside on the lawn, chairs appeared as if by magic. Helen Reese brought lemonade. Tom Halpern carried over a folding table. Other neighbors who had locked their doors for months now walked freely, speaking in normal voices instead of whispers. Children played near the curb without parents hovering anxiously. The fear had broken like a fever. Nina arrived with boxes of pizza, her phone ringing constantly as larger networks picked up her story. She hadn't just exposed Pike. She had exposed the entire system that protected him and others like him. "They're talking about a state-level investigation into similar patterns in other neighborhoods," she told Isaiah, glowing with purpose. As evening approached, Loretta stepped onto her porch, house keys gripped firmly in her hand. She paused, looking at the gathering of neighbors on her lawn, and then deliberately unlocked her front door. "This house was my home yesterday, it's my home today, and it'll be my home tomorrow," she announced, her voice carrying across the yard. "No one is taking it from me." The neighbors applauded, some wiping tears. As dusk settled over the street, children rode bikes across the same asphalt where Pike had thrown that punch a week ago. Isaiah stood beside his mother on the porch, watching the simple freedom of wheels spinning under streetlights. The street no longer belonged to power. It belonged to people again. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.